Good morning and welcome to Rise and Shine Sundays. I'm your host, Jamie Rich. Are you feeling like there's a lot going on in your world right now that when you look around you, there are all of these examples of things that are dysfunctional and broken? Things seem a little chaotic, to say the least. And it seems like everywhere you turn, there's this kind of messy, emotional, dysfunctional uh, pile of what do I do? How do I handle this? And how do I get through it? Well, if that's you, you're in luck because this morning our conversation is what moves you out of chaos. And if you're joining us live in YouTube, I encourage you to recognize that you can be part of this conversation by using the chat to submit questions, because that's how Rise and Shine Sundays works. And helping us in this discussion this morning are my colleagues in the roundtable for Rise and Shine Sundays. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bring those microphones on as we're going. We'll introduce ourselves as we go, because I think this is one of those topics that built from some conversations that we've had in the past, right? And we're talking about a lot of things about becoming aware of chaos, what it is, what it's not. And so here to kind of, Sang, would you kind of help us, because you're really good at anchoring us in terms of the terminology that we're going to be using for our discussion.
Yeah.
We talk about moving people out of chaos.
Yes. Good. Thank you. Well, I decided to do something that's a tad bit different today. So we are going to go. What I want to do today is also ask each one of you, what does chaos mean to you? I'm going to ask the three of you because I want to share and really show our audience like the difference in how everybody thinks. Right. So could each one of you share with me what your definition of chaos is?
Ollie, would you like to begin that?
Of course, as a French and linguist guy, I was searching about this term. So it means chasm, abyss, void, and I think it's to not know where we can walk into. In my sense, as in chaos since many weeks already, trying to get back up, to stand up again, and to know where I am. And it's because I am in the darkness, and hopefully I have some friends around me and outside, also in real and in online, that gives me their light, so that I can find my path in this darkness, in this chaos. So it's from the Greek, and it's really a blessing to attend this session right now. As long as I'm alive, there is work to do, even if I'm in the chaos. Thank you.
Okay, Jamie or Ray, who wants to go next?
Raymond, how about you?
Okay. Yeah, pretty much a similar take on that. Chaos for me is a lot of noise, no sense of where to navigate. So it's an orientation thing for me, where you feel upset and really disoriented.
Okay.
Over to you, Jamie.
I was going to say, Ray stole my response, and so now chaos in and of ourselves. And I know that some of the, there might be some people in the chat, who also have a definition of chaos. But for me, it is that confusion where I do feel disoriented. I'm dysregulated. There is very much a response I feel compelled to make out there in the world, like something is happening that I don't understand, and it's more than just an intellectual misunderstanding. It's an emotional mess that I feel like I have to set into order. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
chaos is like this emotional thing where like I get compelled to respond and fix.
Yeah.
How about you?
Love that. So I want to say, here's one of the reasons why. So one of the things we always talk about is I always ask, and I'm going to answer the question, is remember what I would say, ask them what their definition is first, right?
Mhm.
I learned so much about the three of you just by listening to what you said versus also what you did not say.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so for me, chaos is, I would say, probably a lot more with like busyness, like the like there's a lot going on, almost like an overstimulated. I just need to figure out how to get my ducks in a row real fast, right? And a lot of times, for me, that comes in, then where you're forced to either have a reaction or recognize. Now, the question for the three of you now becomes, when did you recognize what chaos was for you? Either one of you can answer. You don't have to all three, but one of you, or I'll pick you.
Well, I think what you're inviting us and the audience to get in on is to recognize how early that definition of what is chaos
Mhm.
comes into being.
Mhm.
You know, there is I've raised dogs, right? And one of the things that they always try to tell you is if you want to have a dog that can survive in a stimulus environment, there's some people who believe that you should set off firecrackers and, have all of this noise and confusion around them so it doesn't elicit that startle response at certain times. So yes, I can say that at an early age, chaos was something I observed rather than experienced. But I know that for others knew that chaos to be their overall state of being. Like if you've grown up in a situation where everything was emotionally dysregulated, that chaos is normal.
Yes. Yes. Which brings me to the next point, right? Of understanding the reaction versus recognition, right? Realizing one, Jamie, great response in that, and saying that realizing that if you're in an environment where there's constant chaos or there's constant ambiguity, there's constant nobody knows the answers, you then begin to live in that state, or you do the complete opposite, right? Because you may, for whatever in your being says, I don't want to live like that. So what do I have to do? Which is quite the opposite, right? And then, because I know I personally have lived in the chaos, right? And there's always this fighting urge to not live in the chaos, but not know how,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the not knowing how comes from the questions that you then have to ask yourself is, what is not working for me right now? What does not feel good right now? And going back to things I always say, where does this live in my body right now? Right? Is this chaos healthy? Is there healthy chaos? Is there unhealthy chaos? Right? There's all these different distinctions to make to then decide, what is it about this level of chaos that I'm in that I don't want to be in?
Yeah, well, what you're really talking about is going back to something we've talked about before, which is that gap, giving yourself that minute to pause between, in this case, reaction and recognition, right?
Mhm.
Where you may not realize that how reactive you've been because it becomes normal after a while. I can remember when I was listening to this woman describe something. She says, I look at my anger and my frustration as a red flag. And I was like, oh my God, I know people who live in their anger, and frustration all the time, and they think that that's normal, right? It's just beginning to sort of take back the gap isn't the answer, but the gap is the beginning between that reaction and recognition. Is that fair? Does anyone else have that sense about this?
Guys, I'm going to talk.
You keep talking.
Okay. Well, yeah, because here's the thing. We are so attuned to recognizing it in other people before we are willing to recognize it in ourselves first. Right? Because if we sit there and say, "Oh, well, I know Ray does this. I know Ray does that. I know Jamie does this. I know Ollie does that." But then it becomes, what do I do? Right? How do I show up? Am I showing up and reacting to what they're doing, or am I showing up because I'm so aware of how they already show up? Do I get to then be who I am? Do I get to, have a voice? Can I share my opinion and still be safe? Can I share where I am exactly, and they understand? Or they don't need to understand. It's more of just being able to communicate, that shared vocabulary, which we've talked about before, to say, well, Ray, this happens. And when this happens, I feel this way. or just even being able to just have that conversation to recognize what happens with me? Am I having a reaction to Jamie? Am I having a reaction to Ollie? Am I having a reaction to something that Ray said? And I think because we're so quick to figure out other people first, it's so hard to figure out ourselves
Right,
first.
right. Well, and Ollie put something really beautiful in the chat too, which was chaos is contagious, right? And what you're finding is that without that, you continually people are just continuing to stay in their reactions. Just what you're saying is that they're not necessarily finding themselves in all of that. They're still just identifying the chaos. They're still just. Was there more that you wanted to add to that, Ollie?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Jamie. I love saying point in the fact that we could. It's an invitation to tap into our body first, and then also to realize, because it's something, there are lots of tutorials or how to, when you are stuck in the moving sand, or when you are walking in a thin ice and you are the ice is breaking and you are caught in a hole. It's something to know, oh, you should do this, you should do that. But then when it really happens to you, it's really difficult to get out of the nervous system initial reaction, fight, flight, or freeze, and to have the capacity of your prefrontal cortex that you say, that you are realizing, oh, I should not do this. I should say, okay, what
Right,
are the next steps?
right.
What is the next step for me to get out of this hole and to be safe?
But
And
what you
so
just
knowing is one thing and doing is another thing.
Yeah. What you just demonstrated is the difference between being chaos and witnessing chaos. And
Mhm.
that's what's really hard because again, that's where that gap it begins to exist. And when you're in that chaos, I don't know if anyone's feeling this in the chat or wants to kind of build on this, but you know, finding yourself in the middle of chaos, it's hard not to identify with what's happening around you and in your circumstances, right? And what Sang really is and had invited us to do at the top of this is to sort of understand what our definitions are. If we've lived in chaos for a long time, I remember meeting an ER doctor at for a children's hospital here in Kansas City, and she said that one of the challenges that when they're working in pediatrics with kids who grow up in a stressful environment is they have no concept of what calm feels like.
Mm.
Their breathing
Yeah.
is just dysregulated. There's this constant they're just kind of living, in shallow breaths. And she says, it is amazing how much that dysregulation, right? They are, you can see it, you can observe it, and you can kind of begin to point it out to someone. But until people have had an opportunity to pause and experience the shift, they're going to still continue to identify the chaos. Yeah, Ollie, go ahead.
Yeah, and would like also to allow them to have enough strength within them, or to allow them to be setting boundaries. Because it's important, because me, for having many decades of me not having the strength to raise my voice and to express my needs, setting boundaries is really important. Like says, I need a break, my friends. I'm really stressed, overwhelmed. I need to get out. And for some jobs, especially in the hospital system, healthcare, and people related, it's not easy to set up these boundaries, because you are demanded to be there 24/7 and to not have breaks. And so that is important, because if they are if they have no if their body is empty, they cannot provide any more support. They will be in burnout and they will not be helpful. So it's important also to recognize chaos and to say, let me just have a break. I can be back in 30 minutes, but I need this time for recentering myself.
That's part of the practice, but I get this felt sense saying that there's a different technique that you want to share with us a little bit about what it's because you can recognize it and then you can try to reestablish a pattern. But what happens? I mean, what's that process? How were you able to make that
Yeah.
switch?
So one, going back to the definition, right, of awareness, right, is helping you notice what's true for you, right? Knowing where you are. So that's very key, and understanding what awareness is. Like, we're taught to have this external awareness, right? We're not taught to have the internal awareness. And so I'm going to take you. So if you think about a time where someone may have said something to you or asked you a question and it felt like a jab, right? It felt like an undercut or something, right? Where somebody was trying to tell you something without telling you something, right? Or they could ask a direct question. My circle tends to ask me very direct questions that make me go, because someone once asked me, I think you like to live in chaos. I think that you're always trying to create problems. And I was like, what? And I just said, okay. And I just let it go, right? But it just kept stirring and stirring and stirring. And I'm going to invite everybody that if anybody's ever had that type of question or something that someone has said to them and it just sits there and marinates, there's something there for you to play with, right? Something for you to explore and get curious about, because there's something there that is messing with you going, there's something about some truth in that. Is there some truth in that? And this is where you have to get honest with yourself.
Okay, so I want to make sure I get really clear on what you're saying. So you're saying that there is some truth to the identification of chaos?
There could be something there. So for me specifically, it wasn't that I chose to live in chaos, right? For me, because of my past, because of my upbringing, all my body knew was chaos.
Right.
Right. So because I had been doing all this self work with myself, so when this individual said this to me, I was like, I don't like chaos, though. I don't create problems. And what I realized is I tell the truth. And so when I tell the truth, when I tell my truth, other people are uncomfortable and they are in chaos.
You're revealing so much, because the idea is that just because things are difficult, just because there is rising energy in the room, doesn't necessarily connotate chaos.
Mm-hmm.
There's a tipping point of what happens in chaos. I wanted to bring this, for me, chaos is too much energy from other people swirling around me, right? A negative way, so that you lose your grounding. I think we all, just like Ollie was saying, taking a break and removing yourself and knowing those are ways in which you can find yourself, right? But and I really appreciate those comments as they come in. But the essence of what you're saying is that there's a difference between confusion. There are these different levels, because oftentimes we are going to find ourselves in crisis situations. We're going to find ourselves in emotionally charged moments, right? Mm-hmm. There can be a way in which there is this rising energy that doesn't necessarily spill over into chaos, because I get this felt sense saying that what you're trying to get us to understand is that chaos is self-determined in terms of its response.
Yes, absolutely. And again, recognizing for yourself, what is the truth for you? And this is where people have a really, really, really hard time getting honest with themselves. Because when I went back and said, you know what, you're absolutely right. I do live in a state of chaos, but not the way you think. Right?
Okay. Tell me more.
Only because in that aspect, I was learning my body. And because my body and my mind has now taught me to be direct, to speak the truth, to state what is, rather than live in ambiguity. And so then that made another person uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Then I started asking questions, because again, when we go back to what if we're living in chaos? So it was a truth moment for both of us. Only one of us took it away and ran and did good things with it. Just want to say that. Right. But it's about, because then when I started asking questions to be curious now about someone else's state of chaos, it became they became defensive.
Right. Yeah.
So there's a difference. So reaction, if we think about reaction, so I always think about reactions as if someone goes to hit you in the face, you're automatically going to put your hand up and block it. Are you not? Right? and then it's the same thing when people start saying things and things like that, like if it just comes out naturally, it's either one, truth, or you've just been like so trained to be, let me deflect that, right? But it's hard because when something chaos happens and we are sitting there and we just ramble something off, and typically reaction is the automatic response when we feel like something's threatening,
Right.
right? It's what happens when we don't know where we are. It does mean we have not calmed down. We still probably have remnants of emotions. I had a conversation with someone who got upset with me, and they realized, oh, you know what? There was residue from this other conversation I had, and I brought that over here, and I apologize.
And once again, you brought up so many things that we're going to get to unpack as part of this discussion. If you're just now joining us, our conversation topic this week is what moves you out of chaos. And what we've been doing is we kind of bridge into this, as we often do, is we want to get really clear on what our terms are in terms of chaos, right? And what our role is in it, because we do have some techniques in terms of, well, some people are going to be speaking from their expertise for having lived through these things as well. One of the things that you just said, saying though, that which I thought was really interesting, that I want to see how this maybe resonates with people who are watching this live, if they have some things that they would also like to add into it, is that you're inviting us to kind of recognize that there's this choice point in these chaotic situations, right? There are moments when we feel very overwhelmed. That's a legitimate response. When there is too much energy that's going on, right? And so oftentimes the only way to learn how to move through chaos is to experience it and to recognize that when you do have this chaos going on around you, yes, you're naming it because there may be something that you're reacting to. But one of the fascinating things that you just said that I want to see how some other people respond to this is that I can experience chaos over in my workplace, where somewhere else that I've been, and I will let that spill over and ooze into other places. And so you end up, just like Ali said at the beginning, making chaos contagious. It's almost like a germ that, well, wait, why are you being so combative right now with me? Well, it's because of the chaos that got created in a situation that was way over here, and you didn't dysregulate it at that time. And so it's coming out now as a way to regulate it. Does anyone relate to that experience? Ray, does that ring true with anything for you?
Oh, there's so much going on here that I'm processing, and what's really interesting is what Sang and Ollie and you, Jamie, have shared is when you think about it, chaos. When you're part of the chaos, you really don't know what it is and where it's coming from, and what your own response is. And I think what Sang is mentioning is, okay, so what do we know and what do we learn from this? Because the chaos, whose chaos is it? Is it a combined collective chaos, or is it what individuals' chaos creating chaos for others? Uh, but what I loved that also emerged is until you, as Sangha said and Ollie, until you become aware, then you understand, then you start to go into, well, what is going to be my reaction? And then there has to be learned and practiced responses, and because it reminds me of emergency exit training that they make you do for fires. They tell you, it says you can read the card, but that doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
They tell you to uh, go in your house and walk the path that you would follow for an exit.
Mm-hmm.
And they say it may sound stupid to you. Well, I know where the door is, I know where the window is. But what's really essential is your body and your mind work together to almost say, okay, this is what I'll do. This is how I will respond. So I think what's starting to emerge here is we have to practice this.
Mm-hmm.
We have to become aware, and shares also share. Sang has also shared what the reaction part of the represents. So there's lots going on here.
There is. And hang on a second, Ollie. I want to put something in here. And Stacy reminds us that 95% of our life is run by our unconscious mind and programming from before today. So that we're often running these reactions from our past situations that are not new, right? So that is the tapestry that we find ourselves in. Like, it would be very hard for me. I still think that, and I know there's some moms who are watching the show this morning. The idea of holding a crying baby is completely chaotic for me. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to find myself. I don't know what that means. I want to fix it. I want to stop that baby from crying. But as every mom has recognized, there is, just like you said, there's a technique, there's a calm that comes through that emotional crisis, and it's developing that. Does that build on anything that you were wanting to comment on, Ollie?
Yes, exactly. And as I was saying earlier, in the learning process, we are learning, for instance, there are a cycle and there is the theory, but there is also the practice. And to learn by the body, then we can redo things. Even, by instance, if the chaos is different, by having lived already a sense of chaos, we know what to do. But because we practice it, it's one thing, as Ray said, in case of a fire, or in case of someone that is having a shock, how to be able to, because we know the technique like Heimlich, when you are pressing the chest so that the food can get out. We know that in theory, but doing it, practice in real, that's another situation. So there is the theory of the if then, if da 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 da, then da 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 da. But then when the shit happens, then it's really to know really what to do. Then we acquire the wisdom of what to do in the chaos, and not in the theory standpoint.
Right. When the rubber hits the road is a common English expression. Well, I'm so grateful that our chat is alive. So I'm hoping that those of you who are watching this are able to see that there's some really good things emerging. So again, that whole idea of dysregulation, saying, recognizing that, even just beginning to recognize that we are dysregulated, right? So you cannot move out of a situation over which you still are reacting to, right? Because then everything that you're doing as far as moving yourself out of it is just as a reactive, like, in other words, it's like, well, when it's chaotic, what do? Well, I scream louder, I'm going to work harder. I'm going to be more attentive, and you can just, I'm accentuating that place in my voice because it's still trying to top it. You know what I mean? Like, there's chaotic, I'm going to try to tamp it down, right? So help us move out of the chaos of this moment, saying what's emerging.
So I'm going to take you back to old school days, right? The scientific method. So a couple of weeks ago, someone asked me, "Hey, Sang, what are you doing?" I was like looking up the scientific method, and they were like, "What?" Just a random day. And if we were to take what we know back then about the scientific method is about what it is, it's about solving a problem, right? And the first thing we do is pause, is what I'm always going to say, right? Pause before we do anything and observe, like Ray and everybody was saying, where am I? What's happening here, right? Start asking yourself, what is it about this chaos that doesn't live with me? What am I reacting to something within the chaos? What story am I telling myself? Like, this is where you ask yourself all these questions, and it's about self. And it's also, was this external? Did it come from somewhere else? Right? Then you jump into the exploration of, maybe I got angry because maybe there were these steps that didn't happen and chaos happened. Maybe I went on Facebook and shouldn't have been doom scrolling because now I'm pissed off, right? Like, where did now the chaos happen for self, right? Then going into, well, now what happens if I don't go to Facebook every day? What happens if I now say, hey, let me pause before I respond when I feel it in my body, right? To say, maybe that's something for me to think of. Or what happens if someone says something to me and I'm upset? What do I do about that? Right? Again, all these self-inquiry questions that help us become more sharp in our own self-awareness.
Correct.
And then then going back again, scientific method, I know, crazy. Data collection, right? Where did it live in my body?
Mhm.
Which emotions came first? Which ones didn't come first? Which ones came after? What were the different stages? What was my mood? What was my body doing? Were my toes tingling? Like, all these questions to ask yourself. And again, going back to being in the truth of it, to say, did this happen? What did, where did I learn this?
Right.
And then that deeper inquiry of it.
What I also, and I think the inquiry is so important, because that's what creates the pause. That's what creates the awareness. But if I'm having an anxiety situation, right, and I stay too much in my head, I need to do something that helps dysregulate, my body, right? So, because and some people I know, we've talked about this, just be able to come in contact with your body again. I remember there's supposedly this technique, that if you're feeling anxious or there's chaos or whatever, some people would wear a rubber band and they would snap it. Did you ever? Have you been old enough to hear that? Which I always thought was abusive, but welcome to the modern world of therapy. There's all sorts of therapists that have said, to me, it's the equivalent of, like, you're really anxious, so let me just smack myself in the head to sort of, get myself out of this chaotic moment. But I think there's that moment when, yes, you do realize what is my choice? How am I reacting? How can I find myself?
Mm-hmm.
But then where do I go to get here?
Mm-hmm.
Ollie talked at the very beginning about removing. Sometimes the only answer is to remove ourselves from those situations.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. Sometimes we've recognized something. We want to feel our feelings. Are there some other adaptive techniques for our body that you found to be successful? And also, I'm opening this up to anyone in the chat as well.
I think finding that thing that works for you, right? I think when Ray was talking about earlier, it's like, awareness for me is finding out what that is. Is it now I've got to mindlessly doodle on a piece of paper, right? Do I need to tap my fingers so I don't say anything? Because that's usually what I do. I'm sitting here like tapping, like I really want to say something, but then as I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, is this worth saying right now, or am I going to say something that is emotionally charged? And then can I say something in a way that is still creates a moving forward conversation, not where I'm trying to let me push a button over here and see what kind of reaction I can then get out of them, because that'll be much more fun to watch. Right? So I think figuring out what your coping modalities are when you are sitting in a if you're sitting in a conversation, you're sitting in a group, you're listening to what's going on. You have now doom scrolled on whatever social media platform you're on, and you've seen 20 things that just continuously escalate your mood.
Yeah.
Right? Then it becomes what is it that I need to do differently so that I get to control what chaos looks like for me.
Correct. But do you find any value, and this is again for anyone chat in the room, in naming what happens for you, and understanding what that is? Like, oh wait, I'm scared. I'm frightened. I'm like, all of a sudden, when it's all of that emotional overload, right? And you say, well, I'm feeling 100 things at the same time, but being able to kind of break it down to that common thread. It took me years to understand the difference between being anxious and being and not feeling safe. They are two different situations. There are many situations in which I do not feel safe. And my chosen response was to be anxious about that. And there are other things that don't give me any pause whatsoever that I feel comfortable. But beginning to separate out those emotions. Ollie, what's up for you?
Yeah, in fact, being aware and being able to voice it, not only for ourselves but also for others. Maybe I'm the only one to live in this chaos, and that in that case, I might say, hey, I would like to reach to Sang or to Jamie to express what's happening right now, because maybe I'm not equipped to deal myself in the chaos, but maybe the chaos is happening also around me, and there are people around me. But if they are not aware about my internal thoughts, of my internal stress, if I don't voice that, how could they know? Maybe they can detect in my nonverbal that I'm really stressed, but maybe not. So it's really also about who can help me. If I am not in the strength to do it myself,
Right.
it's that there is a great book about that. Who, not how. It's
Who knows?
always to be able to share, to voice, because if it's also for me, but it's also for them.
Right.
Mm.
Thank you for that. I want to stick with this though, because I really think it's important when we take the pause and we're taking back, reclaiming my time, when we're really stepping away from this chaos, we also want to be able to name our emotions to be true for ourselves, right? And I know there's a common concept called mansplaining, but there's this same concept is applicable in, well, saying what you're really feeling is this. Now I know you're frightened. Well, it's like, screw you, I'm not frightened,
Right.
but so we get misidentified and we're told what our emotions should be, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
speak to that. I see something that's coming up.
Well, I want to go back to something you said a while ago when you said you went through different things to understand the distinction between anxious and unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
So can you elaborate a little bit more about a chaos where you felt anxious in chaos versus you felt unsafe in chaos?
Okay, there's certain situations where I can be in where I'm totally safe. If there's an emergency sort of situation, I don't feel necessarily anxious. But there have been many times when I have been in situations where there's a threat level happening, right?
Okay.
And I want to be able to say, well, I'm scared. Oh, well, Jamie, you should be able to handle that situation. It's just your anxiety talking, and you're not even aware you're in a situation where you're not safe. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so you can get talked into saying, well, you just have a reactive mind. You're just feeling a little anxious. It's like, no, I'm in a situation where I'm really unsafe. I need to get out of here because these people don't have my best interest at heart. I'm in a situation, and I think for men, the idea that there are unsafe spaces for them is unfamiliar to them, right? They perceive threats up here, but so that to me is the difference. It's really understanding because I've used that term a lot now, where it's like, it's not really safe for me to go work with those other people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just that I'm nervous about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually not the environment to be in because I'm going to be dysregulated. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. It totally makes sense. So now my question for you is, do you remember a time where you didn't know the difference and what that looked like?
I do.
Okay.
But you're right.
You don't have to go into it, but yeah.
I do, but you have to go back a long time to
Right.
find that.
And this is exactly what I'm talking about. When you pause in whatever chaos it is, and you are able to, one, determine what is this chaos right now for you, whether it's emotional, whether it's physical, whether it's a conversation, whether it's a group, whatever that looks like, right? And then you're able to pause, and because we typically write 500 stories about what's happening, and 500 of them are probably about ourselves and our unworthiness,
Right.
or it goes somewhere else. And then going back to, where does this even come from, right? Requires that level of going way back in that infamous rear view mirror they tell us not to be looking in, right? Because personally, I like to know if there's a car that's about to come up on my behind, right? So I need to know what happened back there that made me who I am today, to where I live in this sort of chaos. What does that mean? So when that person asked me the question, I wasn't offended by the question. I was like, do I? Right? Because did I live that way? His experience of me was that it was, right? Because I didn't know how to regulate my own body were happening.
Yeah,
so being able to go back to that history of what it looked like, what did chaos look like before, and how did you handle it, versus what has happened to you between then,
Yes.
And now to say, I no longer want to sit at this table with these people because 4 of them piss me off all the time. Right. And that's a fact. I like this, these are things that I've been in boardrooms where I've had to position people in certain spaces just because I know their personalities. And if you put too many strong personalities on one side of the table, the other side of the table is going to feel inferior.
Correct.
Right. So it's really understanding language and communication, which by the way, Jamie said, saying you need to have a class. So I made a class, but, but going into understanding one, where do you fit in the dynamics, right? Not necessarily reading the room, but knowing who you are, what your power stance is, but also your emotional level to what you are able to withstand, and knowing what if we go back to last week or another video, is what were the thresholds, right? Where have you reached capacity?
Right. So our good friend Stacy is saying that in that pause, which is a breaking of the state, there's a school of thought called neurolinguistic programming, right? And that when you take that, it's defined by the data that you receive, and you go back to a time when that wasn't the way that you used to feel. That is a really good technique that people could kind of explore and take a look at. But as with so many things, it all goes back to self verification. And the challenge with living from self-verification is that you often also have to look at your origin story.
Correct.
Because, even though I talked about this before we all went on air today, is that, we live in an era. I mean, I can still remember when the crawl was introduced into the news, right? And, everything was this live, late breaking. We're living in a culture right now which wants to continually keep us in chaos, right? That we have to be prepared. We have to know what's happening in the moment. Like, I don't know how many times I'm sure did you hear the news? Have you read the news? Did you see what's happening? So there's this urgency, right? To continually stay that in order to be informed, you must be, full bore aware of everything that is happening at this level of magnitude. So hang on a second, Ollie. We'll get there. I just want to speak a little bit to this idea that when you are self-verifying this, you're looking at that muscle, right? That can go back a long time. And again, looking to when that didn't happen. And that may be a distant memory for many of us, but that even getting there, even allowing yourself that bandwidth to look backwards is part of what moves you out of chaos. Ollie, building on that.
Building on that, first I was thinking about the geographical chaos. There is all around the world chaos. If it's not in some countries, it's in other places, and it doesn't impact us, but it's on the news. So it adds to the chaos that we are living in our household, in our neighbor, in our city, and it's like layers. And anything that happens many thousand miles are impacting us through the news. So there's a geographical chaos, and then there is the chaos of experience, because each day the river might be the same, but the water is not the same. So it's just to tell to you all that each day is different from the past. But when we are receiving chaos, we are always having back to the memory. Oh, I've already experienced that in the past, but each day is different. But we are caught in the past, trying to see the relevance. What could I do? But each no chaos is different from the past chaos. So there's this geographical localization thing, and also the memory thing of the past, present, and future.
Right. And we want to hold on to all of that up here in this head all of the time, right? And so our neurology is just constantly wired into, scanning the situation, avoiding chaos and doing everything. But the truth of it lies kind of in bringing it down into here so that you can walk through. I kind of stymied a meditation teacher one day, and I said, "Well, it's really great to sit in this environment with all the sounds and the chanting and whatever, and to be in this chaos-free environment. But to me, many of us need, well, there's a strong word. Many of us would prefer to be able to experience that calm in the midst of chaos. And to me, I always thought, if I could be on the side of the road while all the traffic is swirling around me, and I was just in this kind of blissful meditative state, that to me is recognizing what it means to be able to carry the calm, carry your own calm through a chaos.
Mm.
Order to get there, it's really developing that muscle to what does it feel like, so that you bring that energy of yourself into every situation, right? And yeah, I see you nodding, saying so. This speaks a lot to your journey, yes?
Yes. Yes, because as somebody who's had to survive people, survive words, survive society, survive cultures, it's literally being a fly on the wall, watching and observing not only how they treat me, but how they treat other people, how they talk to other people, how they interact with other people. Because they say we do not stop, and I'm being very, very honest about this. We as a society do not stop and pause enough to pay attention, because we are so caught up in the chaos of busyness
Mm-hmm.
that we don't stop and be the fly on the wall to say, how are they really reacting? What are my patterns? What are their patterns? Is this a pattern in this business? Is this a pattern in this space? Like, what does that look like? Right? Because when you're sitting, when you're in, if I can, and I love the visual of that, because I can just sit there thinking about all the people that would surround me and all the things they would say, and how I can probably have I would why it's not probably I can have a conversation with people. Just had one this week with a client, had a conversation. By the end of our 45-minute call, she was smiling. Her body language changed. She was much more confident, because I didn't necessarily say, I bet you feel this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I bet you feel this. I said, so tell me this. Are you experiencing this in your body? And does it feel this way? And she was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And so I have that's where I know I can tap in a totally different way to say, instead of having that accusatory language of, well, I know how you feel. Well,
Right.
and he's like, no, that you don't. Right.
Well,
So
I'm very proud of us in some way in terms of this discussion that we've had today about moving ourselves out of chaos, because we instantly bypassed what most people try to do, which is to fix the chaos.
yeah, because we're microwave poppers. We want an instant gratification. We want to, let me pop it in and fix it right now, which
Right.
is why we have a tendency to brush it under the rug, and then it comes back again and again. What is that infamous quote? You keep getting the same lesson in a different form until you get it.
Right. When something has risen to a threat level or chaos, you've escaped it by just, way back ago, you could have said, well, this is scary, this is not a good environment to me, this person is unhealthy, wait a second, I am in full blown threat level chaos, right? And so I want to be able to create that pause. So the sort of practice that we're inviting you to consider as you move out of chaos is based on some of these ideas and concepts that we've been discussing. And again, if somebody's got something that they want to toss into the chat that we can bring in here, but you begin by trying to say, where am I right now? Where am I in this chaos? And Sang uses that wonderful analogy of being that observer, being that fly on the wall, being able to, if you will, step outside in that pause and be able to look at what's happening. It's not, sometimes it is the physical pause to check in with your body, but oftentimes it's getting chaos means looking at the mechanics that are happening in the situation that are in front of you as chaotic, right? And then feel what you're feeling. Wow, this is really not safe for me to be in here, or I'm really angry, or you begin to sort of own the simple emotions that help lead you out of that chaos, and so that way you're no longer lost or overwhelmed in it. And then the invitation becomes, once you are, I'll use the word aware of it, right? And once you are aware of the separation between that, then that self-regulation can happen. And you can begin to develop some of the techniques that we've been exploring here of putting some distance between you and the patterns that you've used to address chaos in the past, right?
Mm.
Because the chaos in the world is going to continue to exist
Yeah.
without without you in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it may, go ahead.
But
No, go ahead.
it goes back to something we've talked about before too, about what does your environment look like,
Mhm.
right? Because sometimes your environment, like I'm definitely one of the people that people will say, "Did you know such and such happened in the news?" I'd be like, "I do not." Right? And I'm very clear because the news doesn't come on in my house. I don't turn the news on. Very rarely does the news get put on in my house, right? And it's understanding, what does your environment like? Do you invite chaos in that manner? Right? Do you take calls that you don't want to take? And I'm not necessarily saying responsibilities and things like that, but like, do you know that certain people drain you, but you still choose to be drug into their chaos because you know that they're emotionally charged or whatever that is? Are you even in a space to receive that?
Right.
Again, going back to that self-awareness and what you were talking about. Again, love the fact that you distinguish anxious versus unsafe, because that was very challenging for me.
Yeah, but I didn't learn that until I was 105. So,
Well,
it was,
hey, I only learned it at 90, so it's cool.
well, and this is the thing when we're really right now, when there is so much that's dysregulated and broken in the world around us, this is the difference that I want to be able to say as someone who's lived a long time. The structures in which we find ourselves with, the conversations that we're having, the situations that are surrounding us have never been more chaotic, right?
Yeah.
And yet we also know we also have these very unique opportunities to practice in correct relationships, in correct situations, so that we can walk through these things, right? But we also recognize the culture isn't teaching us that as an adaptive method. Because really, saying there's some live late breaking news that I want to bring to you. I constantly need to keep you dysregulated so that I can control you, right?
Mhm.
If I can gaslight you, if I can, as a man, tell you, well, saying what you're really feeling is this, and if I can use all of my energy to sort of create chaos, I
Uh-huh.
can be in control. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Oh yeah, I love it here.
So, and to give up control is very challenging for people because they don't have that inner compass to walk with, right? And so what we're inviting you to do, is to locate that within yourself this week, really. Part of what we want to do through this inquiry, we explore it here in this gathering that we do every Sunday at Rise and Shine Sundays, is we take on a topic, and none of us are holding ourselves out as experts. None of this is prepared talk. We want to be able to have an honest discussion about and create conversations that matter. But the invitation is we're exploring it. We're exploring it together as you listen to this broadcast and this recording. But we're also asking you to experiment.
Oh yeah.
And so this week, does anybody have any ideas that people can experiment on this week? Anyone? Yes, Ollie.
Well, it's really to ask ourselves questions. Powerful questions is really important because it allows our brain also, if we don't have the answer, our brain will get the answer in the subconscious. And so for me, it's like, does chaos opposite is order? Or maybe it's not. So it's to reflect and to say, okay, what does mean chaos for Jamie might not mean chaos for me the same. So it's really to realize that we are 8.3 billion brains different. So there are probably 8.3 billion different definitions of chaos based on our past experience and based off where we are living.
Yeah.
So it's really to ask ourselves questions and
Right.
to realize, am I having the time to process what's happening?
And
or not.
the joy of what you just said, Ollie, is that there are also 8.4 billion different solutions. So if you're not finding the solution that isn't working for you, recognize that according to Ollie Derricks, there are 8 billion more options for you to try. So there are possibilities. Ray, what was something that you might suggest?
I want to go back to what Sang said, and it's a favorite of mine, is look for patterns.
Mm.
So you've identified the patterns of the news broadcast industry is to create chaos. Like even if you went once a month, you would probably have enough to that you needed in your life. But then the patterns extend into the people around me,
Mm-hmm.
the work groups, the organizations. And I think what's exciting, based on what Ollie said, there are groups and communities that are providing new places to build these muscles and these capabilities to be our true authentic selves. Just as Sang has referred, is okay, what's true for me? That's essentially should be the takeaway. Let's find out what's true for each of us.
Saying thoughts as we're wrapping up our hour.
My last thing is to do two things. It'll be twofold. As you're having conversations this week, think about how you're leading those conversations. How do you go into conversations? Start just paying attention. Don't change it up. Don't do anything different. Just go in them normal, right? Be open to just going in them normal, to then observe yourself, right? The next thing is to eliminate distractions when you're talking to somebody, right? And really listen and really observe, right? And then ask yourselves, how many times did I talk to somebody this week and they automatically brought chaos to me? What did they already bring to me that I didn't ask for? What did they share with me that I didn't really want to know? Right? What stuck with me and what didn't? And I think that's going to be where I leave it, because it's about observing self first, but then also observing the external, which where we're taught to observe the external first and then internal. So my invitation is first self, silence distractions, and really stop and listen and pause to the people in front of you instead of doing 15 other things while people are talking to you.
Yeah, that's excellent. That is that grounding. And when my caveat for a lot of people that I come into contact with is to recognize that there is chaos that is happening around you, and the challenge is often to not identify yourself with that chaos. And it takes that pause to be able to recognize that oftentimes that chaos is an appropriate assessment of what you're seeing, and to be able to put some distance between you and the chaos, and to recognize that you exist. Finding yourself in the chaos means that the chaos isn't you, right? You may have a responsibility for staying in it, for trying to fix it, and then caring for yourself. I'm going to go back to the slime analogy that we used so successfully last week, which is oftentimes you can get slimed by chaos, right? And you can be brought back into it. We're inviting you this week. My suggestion is to be able to recognize that you have been conditioned to be in chaos by external forces, and being often conditioned to give up your control in that moment by trying to fix it. So take some of these invitations and also share them with us, because that's what we're here for. We are here every Sunday morning having a conversation around topics that are emerging. If you have a subject or a conversation or a question that you'd like for us to address, you can reach out to us. There's a website called RiseandShineSundays.com where you can contact us. You can even sign up to join us in the circle here if you'd like to do that. And we'll, like many people, are going to be emerging to a different way in which we can have these conversations as we move towards them in the weeks ahead. We're very grateful for the Breakthrough Show Network for allowing us this opportunity. I'm going to thank all of us, all of our guests, for having been here. We'll be back here next weekend. And until then, continue rising and shining on your Sundays. Bye now.